you try to make your patients laugh? Do you want some simple rules to follow for how to do it well and appropriately? Stay tuned. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to be funny, yet appropriately funny, in the exam room and other interactions with your patients. So we have an amazing guest for this today. We have Professor Frank Chindamo, who began his media career in comedy writing and production at SNL, and as an assistant on the legendary film, one of my favorite to quote of all time, Ghostbusters. He's won 30 plus awards for writing, producing comedy videos for HBO, Showtime, CBS, PBS, Comedy Central, and more. He's launched the world's first mobile comedy channel, featured on the front pages of Forbes, the LA Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. And he's a former adjunct professor in web video at USC, UCLA, and Chapman University. And when I was looking into who he was, learned of this thing that he is certified in, the Certified Humor Professional through the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor. And he's showing us the diploma. And the first thing we're going to be talking about today is something that he's running that I think is going to be really important for all of us to know, Laugh MD. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Professor Frank Chindamo.
Thank you, Bradley. You can call me Frank.
Let's get started. Tell us about Laugh MD.
Okay, so Laugh MD, while I was working at SNL, my dad sadly was dying of cancer. So I'd work at the show and then go visit him in the hospital and wish that the crap that was playing on TV could be taken off of there and we could play SNL, because everybody knows that laughter is the best medicine, right? And then the same thing happened years later when my youngest brother passed away in a hospital, and the TV was getting worse, more stressful, louder, more prone to generate adrenaline and cortisol. And I just felt like, wow, God, laughter is the best medicine. I just wish we could, put that on the TVs here at the hospital. And so eventually we did. We convinced Kaiser Permanente in Los Angeles and Cedars-Sinai here in LA to put a channel of comedy videos onto their TVs, and everybody loved it. I had by then started a comedy film company. I'd worked on other people's comedies, but I'd started a comedy film company that was called Fun Little Movies, and that's what was featured on the front pages of the LA Times and all that, because we were the first ones to put it on mobile phones. So I got them to put it on there. They said, "This is great." I asked them to pay for it. They laughed in my face. That was the funniest moment for them, only because they said, well, there's no science and data, and how do we know this works? And it's a nice to have, not a need to have.
Yeah. How are you going to generate revenue for us, right?
Exactly.
I guess you could sell advertising on those videos for the drugs that they're giving in the hospital, and then the drug companies might subsidize it, right? But then there's conflict of interest and all the business, and then you get in the muck.
What we did do was we turned it into an app so we could see what people were watching, when they were watching it, and then we started to collect data with the app. And so the first study that we did for physicians showed that after an hour of comedy, they were 94% less stressed, which is great.
How are you measuring that, by the way?
Self-reported, subjective data.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah.
Second study we did at Chapman University, where by then I had become a professor at an adjunct professor at USC, and also at Chapman University. We did another study at Chapman. In 30 days, 30 healthcare providers were 13% less stressed in only 3 minutes. So lowering stress significantly for you guys, for the healthcare providers, in only 3 minutes. Basically, one funny cat video will lower your stress.
So what are the types of videos that are on LaughMD? Like, is that what it is? It's like mostly slapstick, funny cat videos, or what?
No, I mean, I'll send you a copy of the app so you can see it for yourself. And any physician or healthcare worker that wants a free copy of the app, just write to info@laughmd.com. But we have different categories of humor. So it's sketch comedy, where SNL lives, Key and Peele, Monty Python. We have funny babies, because babies laughing at a guy ripping a piece of paper in half is hilarious.
Yeah.
Right? funny pet videos, grumpy cat on a Roomba. That's funny. Pranks and fails. We have inspirational content. There's all different types of comedy. And if you like, for example, stand-up, you'll probably like Craig Shoemaker and you'll probably like Brad Nieder. So those are two of the comics on our service.
Because I'm
So
thinking, like,
that's how we do it.
one of the things that patients complain about frequently is wait time, right?
Right.
I've been waiting for so long. I've been waiting for so long, right? It's why the doctor doesn't respect my time, and I'm picturing putting those videos up in the waiting room because generally when people are scrolling on their phone, yeah, they're like absorbed in their phone, but it's not making them feel good, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's another, prime producer of adrenaline and cortisol. The secret algorithms are that they want to push you towards like rage.
Yeah.
This one emotion. They
Yeah.
want to push you towards.
Triggering content absorbs you, and then you end up in these rabbit holes, right? It's not like
Absolutely.
I end up mired in these rabbit holes about climate change, which is right, not helping my anxiety, the existential dread, not helping. So,
Fun.
but what would happen? Cat video. So I'm thinking like in our exam rooms, not or in our waiting rooms, even these would be good places to have those videos. And we've struggled with, what channel to have on in our waiting rooms because we see children and adults. And so like the Discovery Channel, you might have like Tiger fights a bear, be scary for the kids, or like Civil War reenactments or something like that. But everyone ends up at like HGTV. But that's like,
Yes, that's exactly right.
that's
exactly
just where
right.
it all funnels down to. But that's not like, but I think this would be exactly that. It's going to lower everyone's stress level as they're about to go into an exam room. So, I mean, that's how I see it as applying to my particular position. But who is purchasing the LaughMD app? Like, where are you
Well, let me
shopping this
tell you
around?
that the third study that we did was with patients who were waiting to see or just after their oncology appointments at USC Norris Cancer Center with the famed and fabulous Dr. Jacek Pinsky. And we found there that 91% of the patients who said they had pain said that we lowered their pain. 91% of the patients with pain said we lowered their pain, and 94% overall said that we lowered their stress. A cat on a Roomba, you get absorbed in that, all of a sudden you're like, oh, what was that? Oh, right, my cancer thing.
The penultimate non-offensive universal humor. Cat
Exactly.
on a Roomba.
Exactly. We have gotten some emails from Roombas, though.
They're
Okay.
upset.
A couple of Roombas have
They're
objected.
offended. Yeah.
They don't
They're
like
like,
being
why is
ridden
the
by a
cat?
cat.
Why is not a Roomba and a cat?
Yeah.
Why is it always a cat on me? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, if we wanted to find it for something that we would want to use to help our patients, right? We go to laughmd.com, and then what would we get to choose from? Like, how do we engage with you guys?
So we'll send you a copy of the app, and there's 3 ways that you can use comedy in your practice. So one way is to use the app, send an email to info@laughmd. We'll send you a copy of it and you can use it. The second way is that you can be funny yourself. I think few doctors would be as funny as Bradley Block, frankly, but you can always aspire. So I have 3 tips for that. Okay. So these are 3, comedy writing techniques. You can see I've got the notepad here. And
Yeah. Because, I mean, we definitely need that because I feel like, at least the way I practice medicine, you have a shtick, right? Like, because we tend to say the same things over and over. Like, we see the same diagnoses end up coming up. And so sometimes I'll make a joke and it lands, and then I'll know that I can use that in the future. So, like, even though it's not new to me, same material over and over, it's like going to Denver and giving a stand-up routine and then going to Austin. Like, your audience is different, so it doesn't matter you're using the same joke. And then sometimes the joke, they fail. And then I know not to use it again. Maybe it was the audience. Maybe it was me. Maybe it just wasn't funny. I don't know. But, and so we're constantly like iterating on our shtick. It's like stand-up comedians. We're not, but same idea. We're honing our shtick. So
Yeah.
so please give us some tips on how we can better hone our shticks.
All right, great. Okay, so tip number 1, this is the big one, is self-deprecating humor. Now, self-deprecating humor is easy because in a joke, there's an error maker And in every joke, there's an error maker, right? So why did
Okay.
the idiot throw the clock out the window? Because he wanted to see time fly. Who's the error maker?
Yeah. It's the idiot.
The
Yep.
idiot, right? Exactly. So for every joke that you can think of, somebody doesn't know something, doesn't understand something, misinterprets something, that sort of a thing, right? Who's on first? No, he's on second base, right? The
Yeah.
person who is the error maker there is the person who doesn't understand that the name of the player is who, right? So we can go on and on and on with that, but trust me, that's a thing. So
For
if the
those who don't
error
get the
maker,
reference, that was an old Abbott and Costello, right? Abbott and Costello routine,
Costello,
old Abbott and Costello. So like YouTube, Abbott and Costello, who's on first? It's like a classic humor routine. Yes.
it is clearly showing my age. So the best example of self-deprecating humor I can think of off the bat, there's a movie called Love Actually that a lot of people watch around Christmas time. It stars Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant plays the Prime Minister of England in that movie, but yet he is charming and adorable, and you just want to hug the guy. Why? Because he uses self-deprecating humor. He's always making fun of himself. And he doesn't make fun of himself in a way, and doctors, you pay attention to this. He doesn't make fun of himself in a way to saying, I'm bad at my job,
Oh, yeah.
right? He makes
Yeah.
fun of things about himself that are like, oh, well, I can never remember phone numbers these days, or things like that.
So things that don't have stakes, right? If there's no stakes involved, if it's a dig at your own competence at your profession that's going to give them less confidence in your abilities, yeah, that should be off limits. You don't want to make jokes about your own competence. But if it's something
Absolutely.
that doesn't have stakes, okay, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Another example of that was Ronald Reagan. There's a version of this that Joe Biden is doing now on the campaign trail, but Ronald Reagan said, because he was very old to be running for president at the time that he ran for president, right? And he said, I am not going to make, I don't think age should be an issue in this presidential race. I am not going to say anything about how my opponent is too young to be president. He is admitting that he is old, but putting it on its head and making fun of his own age by doing that, right? So there you have it.
You said
Uh,
every joke has an error maker, and I would want to bring up that at error maker cannot be the patient. Like the
Cannot be the
patient can
patient.
never be the butt of the joke. You can never make a joke about their competence, and I would argue not even to other physicians. Like if the patient isn't in the room, making a joke about patients at any point, whether they can hear it or not, is off limits. Off limits.
Exactly. So a joke that
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to make would be, well, maybe you wouldn't need this Lipitor if you didn't eat like a hippopotamus.
God.
I'm warning
Hey,
you now.
no laughing at this, Professor Frank.
Do not make that joke
Yes.
when the patient is, especially when the patient is in the room. So, I mean, they can't chase you. It's not.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe we might have to edit this to keep it.
Okay. But you can see how that is an example of negative based humor.
Yeah.
That's the second tip for you. Don't use negative based humor like I just did there. Use positively based humor. So when you are making fun of yourself, that is positively based because no one is getting hurt, including yourself, because when you use self deprecating humor, you're really winking at the audience and saying, this isn't really true, but I'm going to make fun of it. Like when Ronald Reagan said, I'm not going to make fun of my opponent because he's too young to be president. He was really saying wisdom and experience count for something, don't they?
Yeah. I like that.
So that was positively based humor because the hidden agenda was that he was positively extolling his own virtues there, right? So what I did with the Lipitor joke was negatively based humor. Someone is the victim there. Someone is hurt by that joke. So that does not produce the benefits of humor. And there are 400 studies that show this. There's a brilliant Dr. Ronald A. Burke, professor emeritus at Johns Hopkins, who compiled over 400 studies, published studies about the different beneficial effects of laughter, the ameliorative effects of laughter. 400 studies, right? And
Sounds like he sucked the fun right out of it by compiling 400 studies.
For him,
Like,
it
I
was.
want you to, yes, it's a huge spreadsheet. There's the ones and zeros. Yeah. No fun.
So what we find is that positive-based humor does increase your serotonin, your dopamine, and your endorphins. Negative humor does not. So you want to stick to positive-based humor, okay? So
You, that
that's
sounds
another
to
tip.
me like a Star Wars reference because positive based humor is the light side of the force, and negative based humor is the dark side of the force because the
Ah,
dark side of the force is easy. It's quick to join up in a fight, but if you go down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. And so
yes,
it's harder to use positive humor and be funny. The negative jokes definitely come easier, but they come with that price and they're just off limits, period, because I make the rules.
exactly. So I just saw Jim Gaffigan and Jerry Seinfeld at the Hollywood Bowl last week, right? Primarily self-deprecating humor,
Yeah,
primarily, positively based humor, and that's why people love them so much.
great
Nate
rules.
Bargatze was on the show. Sebastian Maniscalco was on the show, but he's not so positively oriented. He's making
Yeah.
fun of other people a lot, but still funny. So self-deprecating, positively based, and there are joke techniques like combining two things that are incongruous into one thing. So we'll try a test of that. Let's see. Bradley, you're doing great there. You've got your microphone and your expensive headphones and your t-shirt.
These are fancy scrubs. These are fancy scrubs. I'm not
Oh,
going to
he's in
plug the
scrubs,
brand because they
folks.
haven't paid me, but
So
so the contrast between my schlubby looking shirt and my fancy mic and fancy headphones.
fancy headphones, exactly, yeah. Or there's an escalation where it's like A, B, and then a million is a joke technique, and we'll come upon one of those jokes as we do this. But so that's one way for you to bring humor into the exam room and to make your patients happier. And that's a one-on-one thing that's temporary, and you have to do it, and the responsibility is on you. The other way to do it, of course, is to hand them an iPad that has LaughMD on it, and they can pick their humor and say, "Oh, well, I like funny babies. I think that's funny." And then we've got thousands of funny baby videos on there. Or I like sketch comedy. I want to watch some Key and Peele or some Monty Python, and we have hundreds of each of those on there. So
So you said, we talked about how negative based humor is really to be avoided, as well as humor, self deprecating humor that brings down their confidence in our competence, right? That was hard to say quickly.
correct. Avoid those
But
two things. Yes.
are there any other pitfalls that we should be avoiding, especially considering this is a doctor patient interaction?
Well, the standard rules of political correctness apply. Never refer to something about a person that they cannot change, like their physical appearance, their race, their ethnicity, things like that. Better to leave the patient out of it entirely unless you're doing something where you are positively based, complimenting or over complimenting the patient, right? So if you're saying like, wow, well, you got out of the house today. That's fantastic. By tomorrow, I expect you to be running a marathon.
To a million thing that you're referring like
Exactly.
hyperbole.
That's
Okay.
hyperbole exaggeration jokes. Exactly. Yeah. So then the patient can say like, oh, well, I don't know if I'll quite get to do that, but maybe I'll walk around the block. Right.
But it's still
Spurs
positive.
positivity.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
Great.
So over complimenting, over exaggerating, oh gosh, that's a beautiful set of scrubs you're wearing, Bradley. I didn't know that Tiffany sold scrubs.
All right. There it goes.
That's a good way to do it. That's a positive way
Okay.
to do it.
What about a bad joke? Let's say we're trying our material and it's, we'll try to avoid offending, right? If we follow these rules, but let's say it's just not funny. And we misread the room and they're just not in the mood for it, right? And we just get crickets. How do we move on from that?
There are sentences you can keep in your back pocket like, well, that's why I'm a doctor and not a stand-up comic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Or
that'll work every time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And again, self-deprecating, but you're saying you are a doctor. And do you want to
At
be a
least I'm good at
doctor?
that. I'll stick to that. I am good. Yes, you don't have to worry about my competence in managing your medical problems. You just have to worry about me making more bad jokes.
Exactly. Yeah. So, which I don't think you do a lot. That's my answer.
Well,
Yeah.
I try. Thank you. Well, I try, it's iterative, like I said. What would you want? Let's say your doctor were listening, because I'll use that self-deprecation here. Both of my listeners, one of them may be your doctor.
That's right.
So
So
if your doctor were listening.
I just saw Dr. Luke Nicholson, who gave me a couple of injections about my trigger finger, and feels much better, thank goodness. And he was really young. When he walked in, he looked surprisingly young to me, right? Now, he said something like, when he closed the door behind him, he said, "Yes, I am your doctor, not the intern."
So
Right
he knew
away.
it was coming, says it, and probably says it every time. But to you, it was the first time, and it works. It lands.
And it worked. And it was great.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, he is very young.
Elephant in the
He
room.
really, okay. Yeah, he gets it. All right, that's good. And he had a couple of other like positive things that he said. And he actually, I was looking at the LaughMD app because I knew like, oh, I'm going to get needles in my palm. That's going to hurt a lot. I should use some comedy to distract me from this. And he asked me like, what is that? And we talked a little bit about how he feels that when he's able to say something funny or encouraging, that it puts the patient at ease. People take a deep breath a lot of times after they laugh. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Expiration and inhalation happens in a much bigger way after you laugh, right? So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So what was the question?
What would you want your own doctor to know about being funny? Right?
Oh.
Like if you could give them, because they're listening right now, you can give them a tip for them to use the next time you're there.
God almighty. Well, Dr. Jacek Pinsky, who we work with at the USC Norris Cancer Center, I don't recall him cracking any jokes, but he really appreciates humor. And one of the reasons for that, he's a very deeply serious man. He's like Polish and German. And so but you can get him to smile now and then. And he confided in me that his lab partner at Tulane Medical School was Ken Jeong.
Oh.
Jeong, the judge
So
on
he took all the humor from during lab. He took all of the humor from Dr. Pinsky and he kept it for himself. Yeah.
exactly.
The
Yeah,
humor
exactly.
succubus. Yeah.
Exactly, because Pinsky was hilarious before that, and then suddenly, yeah, exactly. He didn't know what happened, but now we know. You've diagnosed the issue here.
Mystery solved. Yeah.
A remote diagnosis. I love it. So let me ask you a question, Bradley. What attracted you to this subject?
Making self-deprecating humor again. A lot of bad jokes. A lot of bad jokes in the exam room. I tried and it didn't work. So I wanted to be able to do it better. So I figured I would. This is the great thing about having a podcast. You can just email an expert and they'll respond and they'll answer your questions. And then I get to record it and put it out to the world. So yes, a lot of bad jokes of my own, but also my own interest in how we can do, this is what the podcast is about, a lot of the episodes, how we can do the doctor-patient interaction better, right? There are plenty of experts out there that are good at talking to other human beings. And something that not a lot of doctors are good at is that whatever advice we can get from experts like you on how to improve that is better for everybody. So like, it's not just this episode's about humor, but we have episodes about many other aspects of the doctor-patient interaction. But I think the humor one is a really important one and something that we never cover in medical school. Now, should there be a class on how to be funny? Arguably, yes, right? From all the things that you told us about the importance of humor, right? Just a single lecture on how to be funny with your patients would be great for medical school.
Oh yeah, and there are plenty of lecturers that you can get to come. You know, in fact, you should have Karen Buxman on this, because Karen Buxman was a nurse, is no longer a nurse, but was a nurse, and was doing shifts and driving herself crazy and all that. But at the same time was very funny and began to use that humor to lighten dark situations primarily. And she's such a kind and loving person that she became one of the founders of the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor, the AATH. So I'm going to refer you to her as somebody, because she is far more expert in using loving, kind humor in the medical practice from a medical practitioner's point of view. I'm not that, right? I can barely
You
put
know,
a Band-Aid on my own finger.
I had one I have guest hosts on the show, not just myself. And one of the guest hosts said, "Hey, listen, I want to make sure I don't cover material that's already been covered, like when she does her interviews." And I said, "I think it's important to cover material that's already been covered because your perspective is going to be different from mine. And in the same way that I can interview you and her about humor and medicine, because you two are both going to have different perspectives on it. So even though it's the same subject, I think
Mm-hmm.
the redundancy is important because there's going to be some stuff that overlaps, and then it's, reinforcing that for the audience, and then just different perspectives. So I'd love that introduction, and I'd love to have
Oh,
her
absolutely. Let me give you
on the
one
show.
stat, just in case there are any non-believers out there. One stat of the 400 studies, somebody who was also a member of the AATH, what is it, aath.org. His name is Dr. Lee Burke, and Dr. Lee Burke is the head banana at Loma Linda University out here in California, right? Near
Yeah, a lot of California-based references here. Well, I guess you're in LA, so it makes sense.
I'm from New York, though. You'll probably hear it in my accent. Nobody doesn't guess I'm from New York. Aborigines who have never left Tasmania guess that I'm from New York. So, that being said, the Lee Burke study, this made the front page of the Los Angeles Times, okay? Not a medical journal, well, medical journals, yes, but the Los Angeles Times front page. 48 patients who had had a heart attack. 24 watched half an hour of comedy a day. 24 did not. Of those who did not, 53%, I believe, had a second heart attack within 6 months. Of those who did watch comedy, 8% had a second heart attack within 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, let that sink in.
And then they also got to laugh a little more. I feel like that's like the Instagram meme about like not laughing at fart jokes. You can either live a life hearing farts and not laughing at them, or you can live a life where you get to hear farts and you get to laugh at them so you're not only getting the benefit of this like therapeutic medical intervention, but you're also getting the benefit of just having just a funnier life, right? Like the quality
Absolutely.
of life is better. That's like not even being measured there. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. So if you had one more parting tip for our audience, you give us a ton. This is a very densely packed episode with lots of important tips for us. So I love it. I love all the actionable advice. But if you had one more parting tip for our audience, what would that be?
Well, one way to see the humor in every situation, I've been told Einstein said this, so many quotes get attributed to him that he didn't say, but he did not say, for example, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. He didn't say that. So,
Or I hate to write, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. That one gets attributed to lots of different people. Yeah, I think
right,
Mark
exactly.
Twain gets
Mark Twain. Yeah, exactly. So this quote that's attributed to Einstein is, you can look at life as if everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle. I choose the former. And if you look at life like, for example, on Monday, I couldn't open up my hand, and on Monday night, I can, do jazz hands here if you're just listening. I'm doing jazz hands. Okay. So,
and spirit fingers. Yes.
yeah, that's a miracle,
Yes.
right? That's a miracle. If you are just going about your day and, oh, it's another injection and another thing, like, okay, that's one way to look at life. But if you look at like, that's amazing, right? And I got there when this little electronic box told me which roads to take. Holy cannoli.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
that's, it's a way to look at life positively and a way to look at the situation positively and just embrace the amazingness of where we are in life today.
You can get frustrated that the Wi-Fi on your airplane isn't working, or you can marvel at the fact that you're traveling in the sky in a metal tube at 500 miles an hour to your destination, and 4,700 other people are all doing that same thing in the
Right.
United States that day. Like that, you can
Yes.
be upset about the Wi-Fi or just marvel at the amazingness of it all. Yeah,
Yes. In
I love
a
it.
padded chair.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
And someone's bringing you drinks. Someone's bringing you drinks. Unbelievable.
Exactly. So, I think that that is a great way to look at life and to bring humor into your practice, right? And to
Yeah.
add, like, amazingness to it. So, that, and of course, send an email to info@laughmd and we'll send you a copy of the app. And then you can keep them busy when you're not in the room.
With cats on Roombas.
That's one of my favorite videos. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Professor Frank Chindamo, laughmd.com. Thank you so much for your time and all the joy that you're bringing to our patients and to the world.
Thank you so much, Bradley Block. Go forth and be funny.
Thanks for listening. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.